Good morning, afternoon, or evening, and welcome back to the channel. Today, we're diving deep into a military enigma that reshaped our understanding of modern warfare: the Battle of Arracourt. Imagine a misty French morning, September 19th, 1944. 12 formidable German Panther tanks, kings of the battlefield, lie in wait, their fearsome 75mm guns poised to unleash devastation. Below them, 5 American Sherman tanks trundle across open ground, seemingly oblivious to the trap, destined to become burning wrecks. On paper, this was a slaughter waiting to happen. The Panther could annihilate a Sherman from 2,000 meters, its thick, angled armor rendering the Sherman's main gun practically useless from the front. The odds were not just stacked against the Americans, they seemed mathematically insurmountable. Yet, within just 4 hours, 8 of those supposedly invincible Panthers would be charred hulks, their crews either dead, wounded, or captured. The 5 Shermans, belonging to Lieutenant Colonel Creighton Abrams's 37th Tank Battalion, would advance unscathed. By the end of that day, 49 German tanks would litter the fields around Arracourt, while American losses remained minimal. Over the next 10 days, the 4th Armored Division would destroy or damage a staggering 200 German armored vehicles, losing only 48 of their own. This wasn't just a battle. It was a massacre of German pride, a systematic demolition of the Wehrmacht's last illusion. That technical superiority, embodied by their magnificent Panther, could overcome what they derisively dismissed as American mechanical mediocrity, backed by mere industrial mass production. What the shocked German survivors discovered was that they hadn't been fighting tanks. They had been fighting an integrated weapon system, a symphony of coordinated firepower, logistics, and intelligence that redefined modern warfare. This isn't just a story about tanks. It's a profound lesson in strategy, innovation, and how to win when the odds are stacked against you. It's about why a seemingly inferior weapon, wielded with superior doctrine, can utterly dominate a technically superior foe. And as we peel back the layers of this incredible engagement, you'll discover principles that resonate far beyond the battlefield, touching on everything from business strategy to personal resilience. So, buckle up, because the myth of the Panther's invincibility is about to be systematically dismantled. The German counteroffensive that culminated at Arracourt was born from the white-hot rage of Adolf Hitler himself. In early September 1944, General George S. Patton's Third Army, a relentless spearhead of American power, was slicing through France, its tanks outrunning their own supply lines in a dizzying display of audacity. The Allied breakout from Normandy had been catastrophic for the Wehrmacht, and Hitler, ever the one to demand impossible solutions, ordered an immediate counterattack. His aim was clear: crush the American spearheads, restore German prestige, and prove that the American advance was nothing more than a temporary aberration. To achieve this, Germany scraped together its last operational reserves in the West. 2 newly formed panzer brigades, the 113th and 111th, along with elements of the veteran 11th Panzer Division, were hastily assembled. These units were to smash into Patton's extended flank in Lorraine. The 113th Panzer Brigade alone fielded 45 Panthers and 45 Panzer IV tanks under Oberst Hans Heinrich Freiherr von Seckendorf. The 111th Panzer Brigade, commanded by General Major Heinrich Günther von Luttwitz, brought similar strength. On paper, this was a formidable force, equipped with tanks that were, feature for feature, superior to anything the Americans possessed. The Panther tank was the physical embodiment of German engineering philosophy: precision, power, and overwhelming individual performance. Its 75mm Colt 42L70 gun was a masterpiece, firing armor-piercing rounds at blistering velocities exceeding 1,000 meters per second. At standard combat ranges, it could penetrate 140 meters of armor at 1,000 meters, enough to punch through the front of any Allied tank. Its frontal armor, a massive 80mm thick and sloped at 55 degrees, provided an effective thickness of 140 meters, rendering it virtually impervious to the Sherman's 75mm gun, except at suicidally close ranges. German doctrine, honed over years of tank warfare, particularly on the Eastern Front, emphasized the tank duel. Long-range engagements where technical specifications were paramount, where the superior gun and thicker armor would inevitably win the day. Panzer training schools drilled crews for months, perfecting gunnery at extended ranges, meticulously studying ballistic tables, and practicing the intricate geometry of the perfect ambush. The Panther wasn't just a tank. It was the ultimate expression of this philosophy, a mechanical king designed to reign supreme in a one-on-one fight. The German High Command, intoxicated by the Panther's individual prowess, had developed a dangerous blind spot. They believed that individual excellence, whether in machinery or human skill, would automatically translate into battlefield dominance. This wasn't just arrogance. It was a deeply ingrained cultural and doctrinal belief, rooted in their military history. They saw war as a series of decisive engagements, often glorified as duels, where the better fighter or the better weapon would invariably prevail. The idea of an inferior weapon system winning was almost unthinkable. They were about to receive a brutal, unforgettable lesson. Unbeknownst to the Germans massing for their counteroffensive, the Americans had developed a fundamentally different philosophy of armored warfare, one that made individual technical specifications almost irrelevant. Colonel Bruce Clark, a pivotal figure in developing American armored doctrine at Fort Knox, had penned training manuals that emphasized speed, coordination, and, most crucially, combined arms over individual tank performance. The U.S. Army's approach was pragmatic. Tanks rarely fought alone. They operated as part of integrated teams that included infantry, artillery, tank destroyers, and air support. This wasn't just a tactical preference. It was a strategic imperative born from observing early war engagements and understanding the limitations of any single weapon system. The Americans recognized that war was a complex ecosystem, not a series of isolated duels. Lieutenant Colonel Creighton Williams Abrams, Jr., commanding the 37th Tank Battalion, was a living embodiment of this new philosophy. A 1936 West Point graduate who had shrewdly transitioned from cavalry to armor, Abrams viewed tank warfare not as a gentleman's duel between machines, but as maneuver warfare, a chaotic, dynamic ballet where speed, aggression, and seamless coordination mattered far more than armor thickness or gun caliber. His battalion trained relentlessly in combined arms tactics, practicing rapid target acquisition and firing on the move, a stark contrast to the German emphasis on long-range precision shooting from static positions. The 4th Armored Division, under his command, had developed specific counter-tactics for fighting Panthers. They knew frontal penetration was a pipe dream for their Shermans. So, they drilled in flanking maneuvers, practiced deploying smoke with surgical precision, and perfected artillery coordination to suppress German tanks, creating windows of opportunity for their Shermans to maneuver for devastating side shots. They didn't try to beat the Panther at its own game, they changed the game entirely. They turned the Sherman's supposed weaknesses, lighter weight and mechanical reliability, into decisive advantages, enabling rapid maneuver and sustained operations that would eventually grind the German offensive to a halt. The Battle of Arracourt truly began on September 18, 1944. The 113th Panzer Brigade launched its advance towards Arracourt, anticipating a swift sweep of scattered American forces. German reconnaissance, shockingly poor, had reported only sporadic American presence, some infantry, a few tank destroyers, perhaps a lone company of Shermans. What they didn't know was that American intelligence was vastly superior. A game-changer of biblical proportions. Ultra intercepts, the top-secret decryption of German communications, had revealed the German concentration days in advance. Artillery spotting planes, those unarmed, vulnerable little grasshoppers, like the L-4 Piper Cub, tracked every German movement from above. The Americans knew exactly where the Germans were, their intentions, and their approximate strength, while the Germans advanced blind, driven by a desperate Führer, into what they mistakenly believed was weak resistance. This information asymmetry was arguably the single most critical factor in the battle. It was like playing chess with your opponent's entire board visible, while they played blindfolded. The morning of September 19th dawned, shrouded in a thick mist. At 800 hours, 15 Panthers of the 113th Panzer Brigade advanced in textbook formation near Reshaped. They moved with a confident, almost arrogant swagger, as if on a parade ground. They never saw what hit them. American forward observers, embedded deep behind enemy lines, had been tracking their advance for half an hour, calmly noting their exact positions. As the Panthers crossed pre-registered grid coordinates, invisible tripwires in the landscape, a cataclysm erupted. 12 batteries of American artillery, a mind-boggling 144 guns, opened fire simultaneously. The barrage that rained down on the German tanks was unlike anything they had ever experienced. The Americans had perfected time-on-target TOT fire missions. This wasn't just a lot of guns firing. It was a symphony of destruction where shells from multiple batteries, firing from different distances and at different times, were precisely synchronized to arrive on target at the exact same instant. Imagine the psychological shock. One moment, relative quiet, then the next, a localized earthquake of high explosives, literally scores of shells detonating simultaneously. 3 Panthers were destroyed in that first minute, not by tanks, but by the sheer, overwhelming, coordinated might of American artillery. The survivors, shaken to their core, pushed through the smoke and fire, their confidence shattered, their precision optics choked with dust and debris. They were still magnificent machines, but they were now blind, deaf, and reeling. As German Panthers eventually occupied Hill 265, overlooking Arracourt, they spotted Abrams's approaching Shermans. At 200 meters, this was perfect range for the Panther's fearsome gun. The Germans opened fire, a single round tearing through the morning air, but it missed. Before the German gunner could even begin to reload, a volley of 5 American Shermans fired simultaneously. But they weren't aiming at the Panthers. Instead, they churned up massive clouds of dust and smoke by firing into the ground directly in front of their positions. In a brilliant tactical move, they then scattered, disappearing into the self-made chaos. Within seconds, American forward observers once again called in artillery. This time, white phosphorus shells burst among the German tanks, blinding their optics with burning, corrosive smoke. High explosive rounds damaged tracks and vision blocks. The Panthers, designed for precise, long-range shooting, found themselves completely blind, disoriented, and under constant bombardment. Through the choking smoke, the Shermans reappeared, not charging head-on as the Germans expected, but from 3 different directions simultaneously. They had utilized terrain the Germans hadn't properly reconnoitered, dead ground that allowed for concealed movement. They emerged at ranges under 500 meters, where their 75mm guns could finally penetrate the Panther's weaker 40mm side armor. This engagement laid bare a critical, often overlooked advantage of the Sherman: its hydraulic turret traverse. It could rotate 360 degrees in a mere 15 seconds. The Panther, by contrast, relied on a manual traverse that needed 60 seconds, 4 times slower. At close range, this differential proved lethal. American crews, drilled to load and fire in under 4 seconds, could pump multiple rounds into German tanks before they could even bring their much slower turrets to bear. It wasn't about the power of a single punch. It was about rapid fire, sustained aggression, and overwhelming the enemy's ability to respond. One of the most vividly documented engagements occurred when Captain William A. Dwight's Sherman platoon encountered a trio of German Panthers near Lazy. According to the official after-action report, Dwight's gunner, Sergeant Donald Decker, a quiet but highly skilled soldier, destroyed 4 Panthers in rapid succession at ranges under 800 meters. Decker's personal account, preserved in military archives, provides gripping tactical detail. We came around the corner of a small wood, and there were 3 Panthers in the open about 600 yards away. They were traversing toward us, but we got the first shots off. I put 3 rounds of AP into the first one's side before he could get his gun around. The second one I hit in the rear as he tried to back up. The third managed to fire once, but missed high before we knocked him out. This engagement wasn't just a lucky break. It demonstrated the American advantage in rapid engagement doctrine. While German crews followed elaborate, almost ritualistic firing procedures, commander identifies target, provides range estimation, gunner adjusts sights, loader selects appropriate ammunition. American crews operated on instinct, developed through thousands of practice rounds. They consciously sacrificed absolute long-range accuracy for close-range speed, a pragmatic decision validated at Arracourt. In the typical engagement ranges of 500 to 800 meters, speed and the ability to put multiple rounds on target before the enemy could react mattered infinitely more than precision at extreme distances. It was a philosophy of overwhelming the target through volume and quick reflexes. The Germans, refusing to accept defeat, launched a major attack on September 20th. Throwing elements of both the 113th and 111th Panzer Brigades into the fray. Oberst von Seckendorf, adhering to German military tradition, personally led the assault, commanding 40 Panthers and supporting infantry. The attack initially seemed promising, with German tanks advancing under the cover of the persistent morning mist, catching some American outposts by surprise. But the American response was a stark demonstration of their systematic superiority. A relentless, interconnected machine designed for rapid reaction. Within minutes of contact, every American unit in the sector knew the precise German positions. Radio nets connecting every Sherman to higher headquarters, to artillery, and eventually to air support, enabled instant coordination. This wasn't a fragmented battlefield. It was a single, responsive nervous system. Artillery forward observers, embedded with the tank units, called in immediate suppressing fire. And then, critically, the weather began to clear, unveiling the terrifying reality for the Germans: American air superiority. The 19th Tactical Air Command, a dedicated close air support unit, began to intervene. Major Charles Bazooka Charlie Carpenter, a legend in his own right, flying an unarmed L-4 Grasshopper observation aircraft, strapped with 6 bazookas, engaged German tanks directly. In an interview with Stars and Stripes published on September 25, 1944, Carpenter famously stated, "Word must be getting around to watch out for cubs with bazookas on them. Today they saw me coming and began to dodge. It's kind of hard to hit a tank going 60 miles across a field." His words, while humorous, underscored the profound psychological impact and the sheer audacity of American air power. The combination of tanks, artillery, and air power created interlocking fields of fire that trapped German formations in a living nightmare. Panthers that stopped to engage Shermans were immediately bracketed by artillery, their crews forced to button up or risk certain death. Those that moved were relentlessly attacked by P-47 Thunderbolt fighter bombers, their engines screaming as they dove, unleashing bombs and rockets. Those that sought cover were flanked by fast-moving M18 Hellcat tank destroyers, which appeared seemingly out of nowhere, delivered a devastating punch, and vanished as quickly as they arrived. The battlefield became a meat grinder for the Germans, a place where no position was safe, no movement unobserved. September 21st brought catastrophic losses to the German command structure. Oberst von Seckendorf, leading from the front in accordance with German tradition, a tradition that often prioritized personal bravery over strategic prudence, was killed when his command Panther was destroyed by artillery fire. His death immediately paralyzed the 113th Panzer Brigade. German subordinate commanders, rigidly trained to follow orders rather than exercise initiative, simply didn't know how to respond to the sudden void. They awaited new directives that never came, or came too late. The next day, September 22nd, General Major von Leutwitz of the 111th Panzer Brigade was also killed in action. The loss of both brigade commanders within 48 hours utterly devastated German command and control, ripping the head off the snake. In stark contrast, American doctrine emphasized command flexibility and initiative. When commanders fell, subordinates immediately assumed control, often without missing a beat, because they had been trained to understand the overarching plan and to adapt. Captain James Leach, commanding Company B of the 37th Tank Battalion, epitomized this flexibility during the September 22nd engagement at Arracourt. When his radio was knocked out by a near miss, his platoon leaders didn't wait for new orders. They continued executing the plan independently, demonstrating an incredible level of decentralized competence. 7 of Leach's Shermans destroyed 17 German tanks while losing only one of their own, a feat that earned Leach the Distinguished Service Cross. This stark difference in command philosophy highlights a critical lesson. Rigid hierarchy can be a fatal weakness in the fluidity of combat. As the weather cleared from September 21st to 23rd, the full, crushing weight of American air superiority manifested itself. The 19th Tactical Air Command, under Major General Elwood Pete Quesada, had perfected close air support to a degree the Germans simply couldn't match. P-47 Thunderbolts, carrying bombs and rockets, operated in continuous waves over the battlefield. The integration between ground and air forces was seamless, almost symbiotic. Forward air controllers, FACs, rode directly in Sherman tanks, using the same maps and grid references as the ground units. When tanks encountered strong resistance, these controllers could vector fighter bombers onto targets within minutes, turning aerial assets into an extension of the ground force's immediate firepower. The P-47s could distinguish friend from foe at high speed, with American tanks marking their positions with colored panels and smoke. German accounts from captured documents describe the sheer terror of constant air attack. Panthers, designed to dominate ground combat, were helpless against attacks from above. Their relatively thin 16mm top armor, adequate against artillery air bursts, couldn't withstand direct hits from 500-pound bombs or 5-inch rockets. Even near misses could damage optics, jam turrets, or wound crew members through concussion and shrapnel entering through open hatches. But the psychological impact often exceeded the physical destruction. German tank crews couldn't concentrate in daylight without risking immediate air attack. Movement became possible only at night or in extremely bad weather, severely limiting their offensive capabilities. The constant, omnipresent buzz of American aircraft, observation planes, fighters, and bombers created a pervasive sense of being perpetually watched, hunted, and targeted. It broke their will to fight in the open. The engagement at Jouville on September 25th stands as a testament to American tactical superiority at its peak. Company C of the 37th Tank Battalion, commanded by Captain Spencer, faced a German force of approximately 30 tanks advancing across open ground, a significant numerical disadvantage for the Americans, as Spencer had just 7 operational Shermans. Rather than meeting the Germans head-on in a suicidal frontal engagement, Spencer executed a tactical masterpiece, a perfect example of maneuver warfare. He positioned his tanks in hull-down positions behind a low ridge, exposing only their turrets, making them incredibly difficult targets. As the Germans advanced, Spencer's tanks opened fire, not primarily to destroy but to disrupt and channel the German formation, forcing them into a specific, unfavorable path. Simultaneously, Spencer called for artillery smoke rounds, precisely deployed to blind the German tanks. While the Germans struggled through choking smoke and incoming fire, disoriented and vulnerable, Spencer sent 3 Shermans on a daring flanking maneuver through a small valley the Germans hadn't reconnoitered. Another intelligence failure. These tanks emerged on the German flank at point-blank range, catching the Panthers completely by surprise, destroying 8 of them in a mere 3 minutes. The German formation, hit from 2 directions and utterly blinded by smoke, fell apart in disarray. Total German losses in this engagement: 17 tanks destroyed, 8 damaged. American losses: 1 Sherman damaged, quickly repaired and returned to service. This was a brutal demonstration that superior tactics, combined with a deep understanding of terrain and coordinated firepower, could utterly negate a numerical and technical disadvantage. By September 24th, the Battle of Arracourt was revealing fundamental, almost existential flaws in German armored doctrine and design philosophy. The Panther, for all its technical superiority, suffered from crippling mechanical problems that multiplied exponentially under combat conditions. The U.S. Army's Ballistic Research Laboratory would later document that in 30 analyzed engagements, Shermans achieved a 3.6.1 kill ratio over Panthers. This wasn't primarily through superior firepower, but through superior availability. The Panthers' final drive, chronically overstressed by the tank's immense 45-ton weight, failed with alarming frequency. Its transmission, originally designed for a lighter vehicle, simply couldn't handle the strain of the heavy tank operating over varied terrain. And the ingenious interleaved road wheel system, while providing excellent weight distribution and a smoother ride, became a nightmare in Lorraine's wet, muddy autumn terrain. When mud froze overnight, it could immobilize tanks completely, fusing the wheels into a solid block of ice and earth. In stark contrast, the Sherman's mechanical simplicity proved its greatest asset. It was a utilitarian workhorse. The tank could run for hundreds of miles between major maintenance overhauls. Track tension could be adjusted in minutes. Its radial aircraft engine, a robust and widely available component, could be replaced in a mere 4 hours, often in the field, under fire. The transmission, designed with plenty of reserve strength for the Sherman's 33-ton weight, rarely failed, and when components did break, the beauty of American industrial production shone through. Standardized parts meant quick replacement from readily available supplies, often carried in the accompanying support vehicles. American maintenance units, often unsung heroes, performed what seemed like miracles to the Germans. The 37th Tank Battalion's maintenance platoon, staffed by highly experienced NCOs trained at Fort Knox, kept 90% of Sherman's operational throughout the intense battle. German units, struggling with a broken supply chain and complex, non-standardized vehicles, were fortunate to maintain a 50% readiness rate. By September 26th, a chilling statistic emerged. More Panthers were disabled by mechanical failure than by direct enemy action. The war wasn't just being fought on the battlefield. It was being fought in the repair shops, and the Americans were winning decisively there too. The Battle of Arracourt was ultimately decided by logistics, the unsung hero or silent killer of any military campaign. Both armies faced severe fuel shortages as their supply lines stretched precariously across France. But the American response differed fundamentally from the German situation, showcasing two diametrically opposed approaches to military sustainment. General Patton's Third Army operated under strict, almost draconian fuel rationing. Armored divisions, ideally requiring 75,000 gallons daily, received a mere 25,000 gallons. Yet, this limitation, rather than crippling them, sparked American innovation and ruthless efficiency. The legendary Red Ball Express, a massive truck convoy system, moved 12,000 tons of supplies daily over routes exceeding 300 miles, a logistical feat of epic proportions. When official supplies proved insufficient, Patton, a master of aggressive, unconventional warfare, authorized unauthorized fuel acquisition. Units would send foraging parties to requisition fuel from other commands, often under the guise of borrowing or emergency transfers. It was a pragmatic, albeit chaotic approach that kept his tanks rolling. The German supply situation, however, was catastrophic. The hastily formed panzer brigades had been promised adequate fuel and ammunition, but reality proved brutally different. Panthers were notoriously thirsty, consuming fuel at an astounding 2.5 gallons per mile cross-country. A full 200-gallon tank provided only 80 miles of range. With supply lines under constant air attack and Germany's fuel production crippled by relentless strategic bombing, German tanks often sat immobile, waiting for fuel that simply never arrived. They became static targets, monuments to a dying war machine. Ammunition posed another critical crisis. American Shermans carried a mixed load of armor-piercing, high-explosive, and white phosphorus rounds, allowing them to engage a variety of targets, from enemy tanks to infantry concentrations. Artillery ammunition, fueled by America's immense industrial capacity, flowed continuously from Normandy depots. German Panthers, primarily supplied with armor-piercing rounds for tank duels, found themselves unable to effectively engage infantry or softer targets, limiting their tactical flexibility. When ammunition ran low, German crews had virtually no ability to resupply under combat conditions. The logistical chain had broken down completely. The devastating effect of American artillery reached its peak on September 26th, when the Germans attempted yet another major assault. The 4th Armored Division's artillery, reinforced by corps-level assets, could mass the fire of over 150 guns on a single target within minutes of a request. The American Fire Direction Center System represented a revolution in artillery employment. Forward observers, equipped with reliable radios and precise maps, could call for fire using simple grid coordinates. Fire direction centers, utilizing pre-calculated firing data and mechanical computers, could translate observer requests into firing commands in seconds. Multiple batteries could engage simultaneously, with shells arriving on target at the exact same instant through sophisticated time-on-target calculations. German forces, accustomed to Eastern Front warfare, where artillery was often scarce and poorly coordinated, were psychologically shattered by the volume and accuracy of American fire. Every German concentration was immediately bracketed by artillery. Every assembly area was saturated with shells. Movement in daylight invited immediate, punishing bombardment. The official history records that on September 26th alone, American artillery fired over 15,000 rounds in support of the 4th Armored Division. German artillery, limited to a few dozen guns with minimal ammunition, could manage only sporadic counter-battery fire that American sound-ranging equipment quickly located and suppressed. It was a one-sided war of fire. The Battle of Arracourt also demonstrated the supreme effectiveness of American tank destroyer doctrine. The 704th Tank Destroyer Battalion, equipped with M18 Hellcats mounting 76 mm guns, operated according to the seek, strike, and destroy philosophy developed at Camp Hood, Texas. The M18 Hellcat represented the exact opposite design philosophy from the Panther. Where the Panther emphasized armor and firepower, the M18 prioritized speed and mobility above all else. With a top speed of 55 mph, it was the fastest tracked vehicle of World War II. Its powerful 76 mm gun, while not as potent as the Panther's, was effective against side and rear armor. Hellcats could appear suddenly, engage targets, and disappear before returned fire could arrive, acting as lightning-fast ambush predators. On September 27th, a platoon of M18s commanded by Lieutenant Edwin Leiper executed a textbook tank destroyer action. Concealed in a tree line, they patiently allowed a column of German tanks to pass by, then engaged from the rear, where the armor was thinnest and most vulnerable. In a mere 12 minutes, Leiper's platoon destroyed 5 Panthers and 3 Panzer IVs before relocating to avoid counterfire. Not one M18 was hit. The tank destroyer's contribution went far beyond direct kills. Their mere presence forced German tanks to constantly watch their flanks and rear, slowing advances and disrupting formations. The speed of the M18 meant they could respond to threats faster than German reserves could exploit breakthroughs, effectively plugging gaps in the American lines with surgical precision. By the battle's end, the 704th Tank Destroyer Battalion claimed 39 confirmed kills against only 4 M18s lost, an astonishing kill ratio for such a vulnerable vehicle. The battle's climax arrived on September 29th, when General Hasso von Manteuffel, widely regarded as one of Germany's most capable panzer commanders, personally led the last major German assault. Manteuffel had arrived on September 27th to assume command of the shattered brigades, bringing his considerable tactical expertise to bear. His attack began at Euro 600 hours with the last operational Panthers, approximately 30 tanks, advancing in conjunction with infantry from the 11th Panzer Division. The assault demonstrated professional competence despite overwhelming material disadvantages, using terrain effectively and maintaining good coordination between tanks and infantry. But the American response was, by this point, overwhelmingly superior. Colonel Bruce Clark, commanding Combat Command A, had anticipated the attack through intelligence intercepts, an advantage the Germans never overcame. American tanks were positioned in prepared defenses with meticulously pre-planned artillery concentrations. As German forces advanced, they entered a carefully prepared kill zone. The destruction was methodical, almost clinical. Artillery separated German infantry from their tank support, leaving the tanks vulnerable. Tank destroyers engaged from the flanks, slicing through the thinner side armor, while Shermans held the center, firing defensively to channel the enemy. As the morning fog finally lifted, P-47s arrived in strength, adding their devastating firepower to the maelstrom. By noon, Manteuffel's courageous but ultimately futile attack had failed completely. 22 German tanks lay destroyed or abandoned. The remaining forces withdrew, shattered and demoralized toward the German border. The myth of the Panther's invincibility was now firmly in the grave. When the Battle of Arracourt officially ended on September 29, 1944, the results were staggering, almost unbelievable. From an initial strength of 262 tanks and assault guns, German forces retained only 62 operational vehicles, a catastrophic loss rate of 76%. The 113th Panzer Brigade had ceased to exist as an effective fighting unit. The 111th Panzer Brigade was similarly devastated. Even the venerable 11th Panzer Division, one of the Wehrmacht's veteran formations, was reduced to regiment strength, crippled beyond repair. American losses, while not insignificant, were far lighter. The 4th Armored Division lost 48 tanks during September 1944, with 25 tanks and 7 tank destroyers lost specifically during the Arracourt battles. Crucially, most damaged American tanks were quickly repaired and returned to service, a testament to their superior maintenance and logistical chain. Crew casualties remained relatively low, largely due to the Sherman's better escape hatches and an internal layout that facilitated quick evacuation, a grim but vital design consideration. The kill ratio, approximately 3.6.1 in favor of American forces, directly contradicted everything German doctrine had predicted. The Panther, superior in armor and firepower, had been decisively defeated by the supposedly inferior Sherman. But the victory hadn't come through tank versus tank combat, as the Germans envisioned. It came through the superior integration of combined arms, better tactical flexibility, an unparalleled logistical network, and overwhelming artillery and air support. The U.S. Army's immediate after-action analysis of Arracourt provided crucial insights that would influence armored warfare doctrine for decades. The Armored Force Board at Fort Knox, meticulously compiled detailed reports from every participating unit, creating a comprehensive picture of modern armored warfare that went far beyond individual heroics. Firstly, the battle proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that technical specifications alone didn't determine combat outcomes. The Panther's superior gun and armor meant little when American forces absolutely refused to fight on German terms. By using artillery to suppress, aircraft to attack from above, and maneuver to strike from flanks, American forces systematically negated every single German technical advantage. It was a lesson in asymmetric warfare before the term was even widely understood. Secondly, mechanical reliability proved to be far more important than maximum performance. A Sherman that could fight every single day, consistently, was worth infinitely more than a Panther that spent half its time in maintenance yards or broken down on the side of the road. The ability to sustain operations, to keep tanks running and fighting continuously, multiplied combat power in ways that mere armor thickness simply couldn't match. It was about uptime, not just raw power. Thirdly, crew training and tactical flexibility trumped individual heroics. American tank crews, products of a standardized, rigorous training regime at Fort Knox, operated with consistent, almost institutional competence. They could perform any role within the tank, coordinate with other arms instinctively, and adapt to rapidly changing situations without needing detailed, step-by-step orders. German crews, increasingly green due to devastating losses and hasty, fuel-starved training, couldn't match this profound institutional competence. Their training emphasized rigid adherence to procedures, which crumbled under the chaotic reality of Arracourt. Fourthly, logistics determined strategic possibilities. The American ability to consistently supply fuel, ammunition, and spare parts, even at the end of a 400-mile strained supply line, enabled continuous operations. German forces, unable to maintain adequate supply, saw their tactical options progressively constrained until immobility meant inevitable defeat. Their war machine literally ran out of gas. Lieutenant Colonel Creighton Abrams, whose tactical leadership proved decisive throughout the battle, provided a comprehensive assessment in his after-action report. Abrams emphasized that victory came not from any single factor, but from the systematic application of combined arms doctrine. His 37th Tank Battalion had demonstrated that aggressive action, supported by overwhelming artillery and air power, could defeat technically superior opponents. Abrams would later become Chief of Staff of the U.S. Army, and his experiences at Arracourt profoundly influenced American armored doctrine through the entire Cold War. The M1 Abrams tank, named in his honor, embodies many of the lessons learned at Arracourt, emphasizing reliability, crew survivability, and systems integration over pure, brute force technical specifications. It's a direct lineage from those muddy fields in Lorraine. On the German side, General Hasso von Manteuffel, a man who saw the defeat firsthand, provided perhaps the most telling and damning assessment. In post-war interrogations, Manteuffel stated unequivocally that Arracourt demonstrated the utter bankruptcy of German tactical doctrine. The Wehrmacht's ingrained emphasis on technical superiority, on the superweapon, and on individual warrior prowess had proven woefully inadequate against what he termed American systematic warfare. The Americans, he observed, had industrialized combat, turning war into a highly efficient production process where superior organization, superior logistics, and superior systems guaranteed victory, almost irrespective of the individual capabilities of a single weapon. This was a brutal awakening for a military steeped in the traditions of Clausewitz and Moltke. The Battle of Arracourt also represented a triumph of American intelligence gathering and processing. Ultra-intercepts had provided strategic warning of German concentrations, giving American commanders a critical head start. Tactical reconnaissance, conducted by armored cavalry units and those ubiquitous light aircraft, provided continuous real-time updates on German positions and movements. The integration of intelligence from multiple sources, radio intercepts, aerial photos, prisoner interrogations, and even local French resistance reports, created unprecedented battlefield awareness. Colonel Oscar Koch, the G2 intelligence officer of the Third Army, had developed innovative techniques for intelligence fusion. His staff correlated ultra-intercepts with aerial reconnaissance, prisoner interrogations, and captured documents to create comprehensive enemy assessments that were often uncannily accurate. At Arracourt, American commanders frequently knew German intentions. Before German subordinate units received their own orders, this intelligence advantage multiplied American combat power exponentially. Knowing where the Germans would attack allowed for the precise positioning of reserves. Understanding German fuel shortages enabled tactics that forced excessive maneuvering, rapidly depleting their precious reserves. Awareness of German mechanical problems suggested aggressive pursuit that prevented recovery and maintenance, turning temporary breakdowns into permanent losses. It was a war fought as much with information as with bullets. The unglamorous but utterly crucial role of maintenance units deserves special recognition. The 126th Ordnance Maintenance Battalion, supporting the 4th Armored Division, performed mechanical miracles throughout the battle, working tirelessly, often under direct threat. Operating from forward positions, occasionally under artillery fire, these dedicated maintenance teams kept American armor running at unprecedented operational rates. Master Sergeant John Fulmer, a maintenance platoon sergeant, described the system in a 1945 interview with Yank magazine. We had assembly line maintenance down to a science. Track repair in 1 hour, engine swap in 4 hours, transmission replacement in 6 hours. We had spare parts stockpiled at company, battalion, and division level. If something broke, we could fix it or replace it within a day. This unparalleled maintenance capability meant that damaged tanks quickly returned to action. A Sherman hit on Monday could often be fighting again by Wednesday. German Panthers, requiring specialized tools and scarce spare parts, might remain disabled for weeks, if they could be recovered at all under constant American artillery and air attack. The maintenance bay was a silent, gritty battleground, where American systemic advantages proved decisive. Combat effectiveness depended significantly on medical support, and here too, the Americans held decisive advantages. The 4th Armored Division's Medical Battalion could process casualties from collection to surgery within an hour. The crucial golden hour that dramatically improved survival rates. Tank casualties presented unique challenges. Burns, traumatic amputations, and blast injuries required immediate specialist care. American medical doctrine emphasized far-forward surgical hospitals staffed with specialists. Plasma, morphine, and sulfa drugs were available at the company level. Helicopter evacuation, though still experimental and rare in 1944, saved critically wounded tankers who would have certainly died awaiting slower ground ambulances. The psychological impact of comprehensive medical support cannot be overstated. American tankers fought aggressively, knowing that wounds weren't necessarily death sentences, that skilled hands and abundant resources were ready to save them. German tankers, keenly aware that medical support was minimal and evacuation uncertain, fought more cautiously, their morale eroded by the knowledge that injury often meant agonizing death or capture. This medical confidence translated directly into a tactical advantage, emboldening the Americans while subtly undermining the Germans. Weather played a crucial yet complex role at Arracourt. The morning fog that shrouded the battlefields from September 18th to 21st initially seemed to favor German attacks. It masked their approach, providing cover and negating some of the American advantages in artillery observation and aerial reconnaissance. But the fog also eliminated the Panther's long-range advantage, forcing combat at ranges where Shermans could effectively engage and where their rapid-fire capabilities became lethal. When the weather cleared from September 21st to 23rd, American advantages multiplied. Clear skies brought overwhelming air support. Good visibility enabled artillery observers to engage distant targets with pinpoint accuracy. The autumn sun also began to dry the muddy terrain, improving mobility for the lighter Shermans, while the heavier Panthers still struggled with their higher ground pressure. Rain returned from September 24th to 26th, creating a thick, clinging mud that particularly affected German operations. The Panthers' interleaved road wheels, designed to distribute weight evenly, became clogged with mud that froze overnight. Several Panthers were immobilized, not by combat damage, but by frozen mud locking their running gear, a humiliating and frustrating end for a superior tank. Shermans, with their simpler track systems, could often break free with their own power, or with quick, field-level maintenance. The elements themselves seemed to conspire against the German war machine. American signal communication superiority provided another decisive advantage, often overlooked in the grand narrative of battles. The 4th Armored Division operated multiple radio networks simultaneously: command nets, fire support nets, logistics nets, and air support nets. Every Sherman tank had 2 radios, allowing crews to monitor multiple frequencies, ensuring they were always connected to the unfolding battle and supporting elements. The SCR-528 radio in American tanks provided reliable voice communication at ranges exceeding 10 miles. Its companion, the SCR-506, allowed seamless communication with supporting arms like artillery and air support. These FM radios, resistant to interference and interception, enabled secure, real-time tactical coordination that German forces simply couldn't match. German communications, in stark contrast, were dependent on fewer radios with shorter ranges and often more prone to failure in combat. The Fu-5 radio set in most Panthers had a practical range of only 2 miles, a fraction of the American capability. When command tanks, which were priority targets for American gunners, were destroyed, subordinate units frequently lost communication entirely, creating critical breaks in coordination and command. This communications breakdown accelerated the German tactical collapse, turning ordered movements into fragmented, leaderless actions. The ability to talk to each other across different units and even different branches of service was a force multiplier for the Americans. The Battle of Arracourt also validated the massive American investment in training infrastructure. Fort Knox, home of the Armored Force School, had developed the world's most comprehensive tank crew training program. Every American tanker at Arracourt had completed 17 weeks of basic and advanced individual training, followed by 13 weeks of crew collective training, and then 8 weeks of unit combined arms training. This rigorous process included live-fire exercises with full ammunition allocations and detailed maintenance training on every tank component. This intensive, standardized training created a system of institutional excellence. Any American tank crew could operate effectively with any other, knowing that procedures and tactics were consistent. The loss of individual crew members, while tragic, didn't eliminate effectiveness because every remaining member could perform every role. German training, however, had largely collapsed by 1944. Fuel shortages meant minimal driving practice. Ammunition shortages severely limited gunnery training. The complex Panther tank, with its intricate systems, required extensive training that simply couldn't be provided in the hasty formation of new units. Many German tankers at Arracourt had less than 100 hours of actual tank experience, compared to American crews who often boasted 1,000+ hours. This disparity wasn't just about skill, it was about confidence, muscle memory, and the ability to react instinctively under extreme pressure. Arracourt must be understood within the broader strategic situation of September 1944. The Wehrmacht was collapsing on all fronts. Soviet forces had utterly destroyed Army Group Center and were relentlessly approaching Germany's eastern borders. Allied forces had liberated France and Belgium, driving deep into occupied territory. Strategic bombing had devastated German industry, gutting its ability to produce the tanks, aircraft, and fuel needed for total war. Romania had switched sides, cutting off crucial oil supplies, an Achilles heel for their mechanized army. The counteroffensive at Arracourt represented one of Germany's last desperate attempts to regain initiative in the West. Its failure meant that Germany could no longer mount significant offensive operations. The destruction of precious Panthers and experienced crews, irreplaceable by this late stage of the war, accelerated the inevitable German collapse. For the Americans, Arracourt validated their entire approach to warfare. The combination of industrial production, systematic training, technological integration, and tactical flexibility had proven demonstrably superior to German quality and doctrine. The battle demonstrated that American methods could defeat any enemy anywhere, a lesson that would profoundly influence U.S. military doctrine through the rest of the 20th century. The Battle of Arracourt cannot be truly understood without recognizing the colossal industrial base that made American victory possible. The Detroit Tank Arsenal, also known as the Fisher Tank Arsenal, embodied American production philosophy. Built in just 6 months, the facility could churn out 1,000 tanks monthly by 1944. The American production system emphasized standardization and reliability over maximum individual performance. Every Sherman used interchangeable parts. Every transmission was identical. Every engine could be swapped with another. This standardization meant that maintenance units could stock parts knowing they would fit any Sherman they encountered, anywhere on the battlefield. German production, by contrast, suffered from a constant pursuit of perfection through endless modifications and improvements that complicated manufacturing and maintenance beyond belief. Panthers produced at different factories or even at different times might have incompatible parts, creating a logistical nightmare. The pursuit of technical excellence, while admirable in theory, created a crippling logistical burden that multiplied as Germany's industrial base crumbled under relentless strategic bombing. By September 1944, American factories were producing 2,000 Shermans monthly versus German production of fewer than 400 Panthers. This 5:1 production ratio, combined with the superior reliability of the Sherman that multiplied its effective strength, created overwhelming numerical superiority at the tactical level. At Arracourt, local American superiority often exceeded 3.1, despite theoretical German concentration. It was a deluge of reliable, maintainable war machines. Beyond the statistics and tactical analysis lay the raw, visceral human reality of armored combat. Tank warfare was not the clean mechanical duel often portrayed in propaganda. It was a terrifying experience of fire, explosion, and death, a brutal dance of steel and flesh. The crews who fought at Arracourt, American and German alike, displayed extraordinary courage in conditions of extreme danger. The Sherman, despite its victories, remained vulnerable to catastrophic destruction. A Panther's shell penetrating a Sherman could ignite ammunition, creating an inferno that gave crews mere seconds to escape. The tank's grim nickname, Ronson, after the cigarette lighter advertised as "lights first time every time," reflected this deadly reality. German tankers faced equal, if not greater, horrors. Panthers hit by white phosphorus shells filled with toxic, burning smoke, forcing crews to make an agonizing choice: stay inside and suffocate, or evacuate under machine gun fire. Tank commanders, who often fought with open hatches for better visibility, were particularly vulnerable to artillery airbursts that sprayed shrapnel into their turrets. The wounded faced agonizing experiences. Burns were terrifyingly common. Contact with hot metal, flaming fuel, or burning phosphorus creating injuries that period medicine struggled desperately to treat. Traumatic amputations from shell fragments were frequent. Concussion from near misses could cause permanent brain injury without visible external wounds, a silent, debilitating trauma. Yet, amid this horror, moments of profound humanity emerged. American medics treated German wounded alongside their own, adhering to the Geneva Convention. Tank crews, against all instinct, risked their lives to extract enemies from burning vehicles. Local French civilians, despite suffering terribly under years of German occupation, often provided aid to the wounded of both sides, demonstrating a quiet, resilient compassion that transcended the brutality of war. The Battle of Arracourt generated numerous German prisoners who provided invaluable intelligence through interrogation. These interrogations, conducted meticulously according to Geneva Convention protocols, revealed the depth of German supply and morale problems. Captured tank crews described fuel shortages that severely limited their tactical options, forcing them into static defensive positions or delaying crucial movements. They reported receiving only basic abbreviated training due to fuel conservation measures. They complained bitterly about the mechanical problems that left half their tanks non-operational before combat even began. Most significantly, they expressed profound shock at the sheer American material superiority. The relentless volume of artillery, the constant air attacks, the seemingly unlimited ammunition, American treatment of prisoners, contrasting sharply with Nazi propaganda about American barbarism and with the brutal realities of the Eastern Front, often surprised Germans. Prisoners received medical treatment, adequate food, and protection from harm. This humane treatment, which contradicted everything they had been told, often loosened tongues during interrogation, leading to a cascade of intelligence. The information gained from prisoner interrogations provided critical tactical advantages throughout the battle. Knowing German fuel status allowed for the precise timing of attacks when tanks couldn't maneuver. Understanding mechanical problems suggested aggressive pursuit tactics that prevented recovery and maintenance. Awareness of command casualties enabled the exploitation of leadership voids, further fracturing German command and control. The Battle of Arracourt devastated the French countryside around this small Lorraine town. French civilians who had endured 4 years of brutal German occupation found themselves caught between opposing armies during their supposed liberation. The mayor of Arracourt, speaking to American reporters after the battle, described the harrowing experience. The noise was incredible. Shells exploding constantly, tanks firing, aircraft overhead. Many houses were destroyed, but we knew this meant liberation was coming. When we saw the burnt German tanks, we knew the Americans had won. Civilian casualties, while not precisely documented, were undoubtedly significant. Artillery and tank fire didn't distinguish between military targets and civilian homes. The town of Arracourt itself changed hands several times, each transition bringing further destruction. Yet most civilians, when interviewed post-war, expressed profound gratitude for their liberation, despite the terrible cost. French resistance members, risking their lives daily, provided crucial intelligence to American forces, reporting German movements, identifying supply dumps, and guiding American units through local terrain. This civilian intelligence network, built over years of occupation, gave the Americans invaluable advantages that map reconnaissance alone simply couldn't provide. The Battle of Arracourt's influence extended far beyond its immediate tactical success. The battle became required study at the U.S. Army's Command and General Staff College, where future officers meticulously analyzed its lessons. The integration of combined arms demonstrated at Arracourt became the template for American military operations for decades to come. The battle profoundly influenced tank development philosophy. While the Soviets and Germans continued emphasizing heavier tanks with bigger guns in the immediate post-war era, Americans focused on reliability, standardization, and systems integration. The M26 Pershing and later the M48 Patton tanks prioritized these characteristics over pure technical specifications. NATO doctrine during the Cold War explicitly drew on Arracourt's lessons for defending against the numerically superior Soviet armored forces. The concept of using artillery, air power, and maneuver to defeat technically superior but numerically overwhelming forces came directly from the 4th Armored Division's success against German Panthers. Modern military historians consider Arracourt a watershed moment in armored warfare, the point where industrial-age mass production warfare gave way to information-age integrated warfare. The American ability to coordinate multiple weapon systems in real-time, presaged, modern, network-centric warfare, where information superiority multiplies combat power exponentially. Post-war German military studies of Arracourt were brutal in their self-criticism. The Bundesarchiv historical section, analyzing the battle in the 1950s, concluded that German forces had failed at every level: strategic, operational, and tactical. Strategically, committing the last operational reserves to a secondary theater while the Eastern Front collapsed showed a fatal misallocation of resources. Operationally, the hasty assembly of panzer brigades without adequate training logistics, or combined arms support guaranteed failure. Tactically, rigid adherence to long-range tank combat doctrine ignored battlefield realities that demanded flexibility and adaptation. German veterans interviewed in the 1960s and 1970s consistently emphasized their shock at American capabilities. They had expected to face an army reliant on sheer material superiority, but tactically inferior, an easy target for their warrior ethos. Instead, they encountered forces that excelled in every aspect of modern warfare: tactics, technology, logistics, and leadership. It was a rude awakening to a new era of conflict. Over decades, the Battle of Arracourt has acquired mythic dimensions that sometimes obscure the precise historical reality. The iconic image of 5 Shermans defeating dozens of Panthers, while based on specific verifiable engagements, shouldn't obscure the broader, more profound truth that American victory came through systematic superiority rather than individual heroism or a lucky break. The Sherman tank, often unfairly disparaged in popular history, proved at Arracourt that wars are won by weapon systems, not by individual isolated weapons. The Panther, for all its technical excellence, failed because it was just a tank. The Sherman succeeded because it was an integral, well-oiled part of a combined arms team that included artillery, air support, infantry, tank destroyers, and, crucially, an unparalleled logistical and maintenance backbone. The battle demonstrated with brutal clarity that military effectiveness comes from the seamless synthesis of multiple factors: training, doctrine, logistics, technology, and leadership. No single element, no matter how superior, can overcome a systematic disadvantage in all other areas. This lesson remains profoundly relevant today, as modern militaries grapple with balancing technological advancement with systemic capability. Understanding that the most advanced weapon is useless without the infrastructure, training, and doctrine to support it. The Battle of Arracourt, from September 18th to 29th, 1944, stands as more than a tactical victory. It represented the resounding validation of American military philosophy developed between the world wars. The idea that an industrial democracy's inherent strengths could be translated into overwhelming military superiority through the systematic application of combined arms warfare. German forces arrived at Arracourt confident in their technical superiority and their entrenched tactical doctrine. The Panther tank, with its powerful gun and thick armor, seemed to guarantee success against the lighter, more vulnerable Sherman. German crews, inheritors of a proud Prussian military tradition, truly believed their superior warrior skills would overcome American material abundance. They discovered instead that modern warfare had evolved beyond their understanding, beyond their philosophy of individual prowess. The Americans weren't fighting tank duels. They were conducting integrated operations where tanks were merely one component in a much larger coordinated symphony of destruction. Artillery, air power, intelligence, logistics, and communications combined to create an overwhelming, multifaceted superiority that no amount of armor thickness or gun caliber could overcome. The shocked German survivors carried back a truth that no amount of propaganda could counter. They had encountered a form of warfare they simply couldn't match. Not because American tanks were inherently better, they weren't. Not because American soldiers were braver, courage is universal. But because the Americans had created a system of warfare that turned every advantage into multiplied combat power. a force that operated like a single, unbreakable fist. Lieutenant Colonel Abrams and his 37th Tank Battalion had demonstrated that victory in modern warfare came not from individual superiority, but from systematic integration and relentless adaptation. The 5 Shermans that seemed like easy prey to the German Panthers that September morning had behind them the full, terrifying weight of American industrial democracy. A force that would grind Nazi Germany into unconditional surrender within 8 months. At Arracourt, German tankers learned what their comrades in POW camps were simultaneously discovering. American strength lay not in any single weapon or tactic, but in the uncanny ability to organize, supply, and coordinate overwhelming force at the decisive point. They had challenged the arsenal of democracy, and discovered it was not just an arsenal. It was an entire, interconnected system of warfare they were powerless to defeat. The fields around Arracourt, littered with burned-out Panthers, told the story. Technical superiority had met systemic superiority, and systemic superiority had won. The German tankers who survived carried this bitter lesson back to a crumbling Reich. They had seen the future of warfare, and it was undeniably, unequivocally American.